Introduction. The journey begins. The history of the United States is not just a chronicle of dates and events. It is the saga of a bold experiment in freedom and democracy. From humble beginnings to global influence, the story of America is one of resilience, innovation, and the unyielding pursuit of ideals. But this story isn't without its complexities. It's filled with moments of triumph and heartbreak, innovation and conflict. As we unravel the tapestry of America's past, you'll see how this nation, shaped by diverse voices and bold actions, became a symbol of possibility and progress. So sit back as we embark on an unforgettable journey, a journey that will inspire, enlighten, and remind us all of the enduring power of the American spirit. Chapter 1. The First Americans. Long before European ships appeared on the horizon, the Americas were home to millions of indigenous peoples. These were societies rich in culture, innovation, and spirituality. From the vast city of Cahokia, with its towering mounds, to the intricate cliff dwellings of the ancestral Puebloans, Native Americans had built a world that thrived on trade, art, and deep connections to nature. For centuries, they lived in balance with the land, creating sophisticated systems of governance like the Iroquois Confederacy, which some scholars say influenced the framers of the U.S. Constitution. But the arrival of Europeans marked the beginning of an era of profound disruption. With colonization came waves of disease, land dispossession, and conflict, devastating indigenous communities. Yet, even in the face of such adversity, Native Americans have shown remarkable resilience, preserving their heritage and continuing to contribute to the nation's story. Chapter 2. Exploration and colonization. The age of exploration was fueled by dreams of wealth, power, and discovery. When Christopher Columbus arrived in the Americas in 1492, he unknowingly set off a chain of events that would reshape the world. The Spanish conquered vast territories, establishing colonies in Florida and the Southwest. The French, driven by fur trade and alliances with native tribes, settled along the Mississippi River and in Canada. By 1607, the English had planted their flag in Jamestown, Virginia. The settlers faced brutal conditions, harsh winters, famine, and conflicts with local Powhatan tribes. Yet, through perseverance and the cultivation of tobacco, they managed to survive and eventually thrive. Further north, in 1620, the Pilgrims established Plymouth Colony, driven by a desire for religious freedom. These early settlements marked the beginning of what would become a complex and growing network of colonies stretching along the Atlantic coast. Chapter 3. Life in the colonies. As the colonies grew, they developed distinct regional identities. In New England, towns were centered around community and faith, with a focus on education and craftsmanship. In the middle colonies, diversity flourished, with settlers from various European backgrounds contributing to a thriving economy. The southern colonies, meanwhile, relied heavily on plantation agriculture, with crops like tobacco, rice, and indigo driving economic growth, but at a great human cost. Enslaved Africans were brought to the colonies, forced to work under brutal conditions that built much of the South's wealth. Their resistance and resilience would plant the seeds for future struggles for justice. Colonial life wasn't just about survival. It was about laying the groundwork for a new society. Markets bustled with goods, newspapers spread ideas, and debates over governance began to take shape. Beneath the prosperity, however, lay tensions that would soon ignite revolution. Chapter 4. The Road to Revolution. The 18th century brought prosperity, but also growing discontent. As Britain tightened its control over the colonies, imposing taxes like the Stamp Act and Townshend Acts, colonists felt increasingly alienated. The idea of no taxation without representation struck a chord, uniting merchants, farmers, and intellectuals. Protests turned into acts of defiance. In 1770, the Boston Massacre shocked the colonies as British soldiers fired on unarmed civilians. In 1773, the Boston Tea Party saw patriots dumping British tea into the harbor as a symbolic act of resistance. By 1774, the First Continental Congress convened, signaling that the colonies were no longer willing to accept British rule. With tensions escalating, war was no longer a question of if, but when. Chapter 5. The Revolutionary War. The Revolutionary War began in 1775 with the battles of Lexington and Concord. The ragtag Continental Army, led by George Washington, faced the formidable British Empire. The Declaration of Independence, adopted on July 4, 1776, wasn't just a declaration of war. It was a bold assertion of human rights and freedom. The war was grueling, marked by moments of despair and hope. Key victories at Trenton and Saratoga showed the world that the American spirit could not be broken. With help from France, the war culminated in the decisive victory at Yorktown in 1781. 2 years later, the Treaty of Paris officially recognized the United States as an independent nation. The revolution wasn't just a military success. It was the birth of a new ideology, one that would inspire movements for freedom around the globe. Chapter 6: Building a Nation. The United States may have won independence, but its survival was far from assured. The Articles of Confederation provided a loose framework for governance, but they lacked the strength to unify the states. In 1787, delegates from across the states gathered in Philadelphia to draft the U.S. Constitution. This revolutionary document created a government of 3 branches: executive, legislative, and judicial, designed to balance power and protect liberty. The addition of the Bill of Rights ensured fundamental freedoms like speech, religion, and due process. These early years were critical, as the nation navigated foreign threats, economic challenges, and domestic divisions. But the foundations of democracy were now firmly in place. Chapter 7: Westward Expansion. The 19th century saw Americans pushing westward in pursuit of land, opportunity, and a belief in manifest destiny, the idea that the U.S. was destined to span from the Atlantic to the Pacific. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803 doubled the nation's size, and expeditions like those of Lewis and Clark opened new frontiers. Settlers faced harsh conditions, but their determination led to new states, industries, and infrastructure. However, this expansion wasn't without consequence. Native American tribes were forcibly removed through policies like the Indian Removal Act, leading to tragedies such as the Trail of Tears. The growing divide between free and slave states also heightened tensions that would eventually lead to the Civil War. Westward expansion symbolized the American dream, but it also revealed the deep complexities of growth and justice. Chapter 8: The Civil War and Emancipation. The Civil War, fought between 1861 and 1865, was not just a battle over states' rights, it was a battle for the soul of a nation. At its heart was the deeply entrenched institution of slavery, an issue that had divided the country since its inception. Abraham Lincoln's election in 1860 was the final spark. Southern states, fearing the abolition of slavery, seceded from the Union to form the Confederate States of America. What followed was the bloodiest conflict in American history. The Union Army, under Lincoln's leadership, fought to preserve the nation, while the Confederacy sought independence. The turning point came in 1863 with the Battle of Gettysburg and Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, which declared enslaved people in Confederate states free. Though the Union triumphed, the war left scars that would take generations to heal. Over 600,000 lives were lost, towns were ravaged, and families torn apart. But the war also marked a new chapter, a commitment to liberty and equality, enshrined in the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery. Chapter 9: Reconstruction and the Struggle for Equality. The end of the Civil War brought hope, but also immense challenges. Reconstruction aimed to reunite a fractured nation and address the injustices of slavery. For a brief period, progress seemed possible. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments abolished slavery, granted citizenship to formerly enslaved people, and gave black men the right to vote. African Americans began to build communities, schools, and churches, and some even held political office. But resistance was fierce. Groups like the Ku Klux Klan emerged, using violence and terror to suppress black Americans' rights. By 1877, Reconstruction ended, leaving much of its promise unfulfilled. Jim Crow laws institutionalized segregation, and systemic racism became entrenched. Yet the resilience of black communities and their unyielding fight for justice kept the dream of equality alive, planting the seeds for future civil rights movements. Chapter 10: The Gilded Age and Industrial Revolution. The late 19th century saw America transform into an industrial powerhouse. The Gilded Age, as it was called, was a time of rapid economic growth, technological innovation, and stark inequality. Railroads connected the country, steel and oil industries boomed, and cities like New York and Chicago became centers of commerce. Inventors like Thomas Edison and Alexander Graham Bell changed everyday life with their groundbreaking creations. But beneath the glittering surface lay deep social challenges. Factory workers toiled for long hours in dangerous conditions, and child labor was widespread. Labor unions like the Knights of Labor and the American Federation of Labor emerged, demanding fair wages and safer workplaces. This era also saw a massive wave of immigration, with millions arriving from Europe and Asia. These newcomers enriched the cultural fabric of America, but they also faced discrimination and hardship as they sought the American dream. Chapter 11: The World Wars and American Leadership. The 20th century thrust the United States onto the global stage. In World War I, America entered the conflict in 1917, helping to turn the tide against Germany and its allies. The war ended in 1918, with the US emerging as a significant global power. But it was World War II that truly defined America's role in the world. After the attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941, the US joined the Allies in a battle against fascism. American ingenuity and determination were key to the war effort. Soldiers fought bravely in Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific, while women and minorities filled roles on the home front, proving that unity could achieve extraordinary things. The war ended in 1945, with the US as a superpower. The Marshall Plan rebuilt Europe, and institutions like the United Nations were created to prevent future conflicts. Yet the use of atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki ushered in a new, dangerous era: the Cold War. Chapter 12: The Civil Rights Era and Social Change. The mid-20th century was a time of profound transformation. The civil rights movement challenged the systemic racism that had persisted since Reconstruction. Leaders like Martin Luther King Jr., Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X became icons of justice and equality. Key victories included the Brown v. Board of Education decision in 1954, which ended school segregation, and the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which outlawed discrimination based on race, color, religion, or national origin. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 ensured that African Americans could exercise their right to vote. This era also saw movements for women's rights, LGBTQ+ rights, and environmental protections. It was a time when ordinary citizens united to demand a better, fairer America. Though the struggles were immense, the progress made during this time laid the foundation for ongoing efforts toward equality. Chapter 13: The Cold War and Technological Growth. The post-war era was dominated by the Cold War, a geopolitical struggle between the United States and the Soviet Union. From the Berlin airlift to the Cuban Missile Crisis, America faced constant challenges in defending democracy against communism. This period also saw incredible technological advancements. The space race reached its peak in 1969 when Neil Armstrong became the first human to set foot on the moon, a moment that inspired the world and showcased American innovation. Domestically, the 1950s and 60s were a time of prosperity for many, but also of social unrest. The Vietnam War divided the nation, and movements for justice and equality continued to shape American society. Chapter 14: Modern America. Challenges and Opportunities. In recent decades, America has faced new challenges: economic recessions, political polarization, and the rise of global terrorism. Events like the September 11, 2001 attacks reshaped national priorities and led to prolonged conflicts abroad. Technological advancements have transformed how Americans live, work, and communicate. The rise of the internet and innovations in medicine, energy, and AI have opened up incredible possibilities. Despite challenges like climate change and social divides, the American spirit of resilience and innovation remains strong. The country continues to be a beacon of hope for people around the world, demonstrating that progress is always possible when individuals come together for a common purpose. Conclusion: a living history. The history of the United States is far from over. Each generation adds its own chapter, shaping the nation in profound ways. From the dreams of its founders to the struggles for equality and justice, America's story is one of constant evolution. As we look to the future, the lessons of the past guide us. The United States remains a land of opportunity, a place where challenges are met with courage and where the pursuit of a more perfect union continues. The question now is, what will the next chapter hold? That answer lies in the hands of its people, in their determination to build a better tomorrow for all.